Hi everyone. We are going to get started with today's Launchpad Live session. Today is the last Launchpad Live of 2023, so we will have one last workshop on Tuesday next week, but this is the last live session, so we'll resume beginning of January. So looking forward to the last session, and then you guys get a break. So just to start, the University of Calgary, located in the heart of southern Alberta, both acknowledges and pays tribute to the traditional territories of the peoples of Treaty 7, which includes the Blackfoot Confederacy, comprised of the Siksika, the Kainai, and Kainai First Nations, the Tsuut'ina First Nation, and the Stoney Nakoda, including Chiniki, Bearspaw, and Goodstoney First Nations. The city of Calgary is also home to the Métis Nation of Alberta, Region 3. So today, I will be your presenter, and we will be talking about presenting and the pitch. You guys all know me, so I am not going to bother to introduce myself because we've been through enough together with Launchpad. So to get started, I just want you to take a moment to think back to a conversation you've had in the past month. Now, a month is a long time, and I just want you to pick one conversation. Okay. Can someone shout out why you remember that conversation? Why was that the one conversation in the thousands you've had in the last month that you remember? Yep.
Because it was like a 2-hour conversation with my dad.
Okay, so very long conversation with someone who's probably pretty important to you. Okay. Anyone else? Yep.
When I pitched my idea, there was a word that stuck out to me because our project is like iPilot, which is a shelving robot or like inventory management on shelves. And they said, oh, it's an inventory management robot. And there's lots of kinds of inventory. So I have to make sure to say it's on shelving.
Okay, so it was probably like, it was like a new concept to you, and you were like trying to make sure you got it right.
Just improving my pitches.
Improving your pitches, okay. I saw a hand over here. Yeah?
My conversation with my supervisor about my different state.
Okay, so that's probably like a emotional conversation, maybe a little bit stressful. Awesome. Okay, so what I wanted to get to is the heart of like very memorable stories are what stand out. So relatable, a clear expectation. The speaker was very charismatic and engaging. It had an emotional response, so you're very stressed about or nervous or excited about your defense date. It was a problem you've experienced. You saw a potential solution, or maybe you wanted to learn more. So whatever that was, there was a reason that was the one conversation that stood out to you in the thousands of conversations you've had. And that's really what the power of storytelling is. Now, the reason storytelling is so important, especially in a pitch, and we're gonna go through different types of pitches, but it's so important because whoever you're pitching to probably gets pitched to all of the time, and so you really wanna make it so that your solution and your pitch or your presentation stands out. So storytelling can really set you apart from all of the other presentations that are happening. So thinking of different ways you can communicate, so not just in terms of what you're saying and how you're saying it, but using photos, videos, really engaging graphics to kind of help people retain that information and again, help you stand out. Stories can also help to make very complex ideas simple and remembered. If we think back to kind of the beginning of time, the beginning of humans, we have been passing down stories from generation to generation because that's how we share complex ideas, complex information. So stories really help to make things remembered and make things very simple and easy to understand. They can also move people. A lot of time there's an emotional pull that whether it's excitement, whether it's stress, whether it's anxiety, whatever it is, that really draw people in and move people. And if they're really feeling the story that you're trying to tell them, then again, they're gonna react. It's gonna not just be something they hear and process, but it's also gonna be something they feel. And the last thing is that stories are about the user and not necessarily the product or service. So people are going to relate and be able to relate and connect with and then understand when you're talking about problem someone is experiencing versus if you're just like, hey, here's this cool product. Unless they're really, really excited about it, which is really hard to do, they're probably just like, okay, cool, that's a cool product, or I don't care about that product is more likely, and then they just forget. So really being able to weave that storytelling in through whatever type of presentation or pitch you're doing is very helpful in terms of helping you to stand out. So touching on communication skills, because you've got this story and you need to tell it, how do you communicate that story? So for all of the engineers and scientists in the room, this is going to be a fun video for you that I love showing.
Hey, I've got a great idea for a business.
That's exciting. Tell me about it.
I've developed a chemical isomer that links to volatile organic compounds causing carbon bonds to rupture and wraps them in a nanotube coating.
Huh. That's a little confusing. Can you dumb it down for me?
Sure. What I do is I take a proprietary isomer that I developed with a picric acid wash that hollows out the carbon bonds and replaces them with a nanotube wrapping.
Okay, so I guess it's pretty technical.
Oh yeah. I've been working on this isomer for 9 years.
So what's the business idea?
To sell it,
To who?
everybody will want one,
What for?
so they can wrap their volatile organic compounds in carbon nanotubes.
I think you might need a target customer. I don't think I need to wrap my compounds in your nanotube.
Well, maybe not you.
So, for people who buy it, what's the value you are providing them?
I've developed a chemical isomer that links to volatile organic compounds causing carbon bonds to rupture and wraps them in a nanotube coating.
You've said that already. This is getting annoying. Why should anyone care about your isomer?
I spent 9 years on this.
I know that. Okay, pretend I'm an investor. How can I make money off your product?
By selling it.
You're a smart guy, but try not to think like a scientist. Think like a business person.
Okay. Value chain. Term sheet.
I have to go now and answer that.
That's not your phone.
I know.
So as you can see, and this is obviously a very technical example, but this extends to any kind of complex solution that you're doing unless you have a very clear explanation of what it is you're doing, what value it's bringing people, and you can explain it in a way that everybody can understand. You're going to sound like that, and we want to avoid sounding like that because no one is going to want to deal with you if you are just kind of repeating some very complex things because they're not going to understand what it is that you're doing. Okay, so communication skills is really the ultimate key to success. We've talked about, you can have the best thing that exists, you can build the best product, you can build the best service, but if it doesn't solve a problem, it's not going anywhere. But if you also can't communicate that problem, then no one is going to understand what it is. No one is going to understand why it is the greatest thing that's ever been created. And then you're still not going to be able to get customers, to be able to get partners, to be able to get investors, whatever it is that you're looking for. So it's better to have an average business idea with great communication than to have the best business idea ever with, average or subpar communication. And really communicating your why. So when in that video, she said, why should I buy this? And he said, well, I've spent 9 years on it. Great, that's great for you, but what does that do for me? I don't care that you spent 9 years on it. What does that mean for me? So really communicating, why is this important? What is the value that you're providing? You also want to be able to try to cut through the noise, especially if you're selling to consumers, but even people who are selling business to business, B2B, there's a lot out there. There's a lot of people that are doing a lot of different things, that are saying they can do a lot of things. So really being able to clearly explain the why and have that story to kind of cut through that noise so that you can clearly articulate that value is going to be helpful. And the last piece is that you as the founder are the brand of the company. A lot of times at this early stage, people are not investing, whether it's investors actually investing dollars, whether it's people taking a chance on spending money on your solution. People are oftentimes investing in you as the founder, and so really being able to clearly communicate and to give people that opportunity to want to buy into what you're doing can be so significant. So in terms of that, you want to kind of create a really viable venture, you have to capitalize on consumer pain points. And so this is where really understanding the problem, and this is why we're getting you guys to do so much customer discovery, because we really want you to understand what is the pain point, what is the problem, and how can you either give them a win, give them a solution or take away the pain, the problem that they're experiencing. And so you really want to be able to, again, not just identify that and build a solution, but then the third piece of that is actually being able to communicate that. And so again, offering your value in a way that resonates with that audience. Even at the very beginning when you're doing the customer development, you're talking to people, talking to them in a language, like if they're horse people, like using horse terminology is great. If they're scientists and they like a little bit more technical, being able to get onto their level of technicality so they're still understanding what you're doing. So really understanding who you're talking to so you can phrase and communicate in a way that makes sense to them. This is always about your customer, and so this is no different for communication. So this is the customer development triangle. So you can see we've got the problem, we've got the product or solution, and then you've got the target customer. And so your goal as a founder is to really find that like centerpiece that kind of encapsulates all three of those points and being able to deliver that value to them. And what this ultimately becomes is your value proposition. So your value proposition is a statement of the unique benefits delivered by your offerings to your target customer. So it kind of, that triangle on this slide, it kind of clearly communicates what is in that triangle in one statement, one sentence. It should be very clear, very brief, and very memorable so that they really understand. Like, you want them to hear this one-liner and just be like, yes, this is, I completely understand what you're doing, what problem you're solving, and who you're doing it for. And ideally, it's unique so that it shows how you differentiate from competitors or other people who are solving us the problem. It is also not a marketing tagline, it is not an elevator pitch, and it is not a mission statement. So this is sort of the like, when someone is like, hey, what do you do? And you have one sentence, that is what you say so that they understand what you're doing. So the different components, again, what you're offering, the specific values that are associated with your offerings. This says 1 to 3. I typically try to find like no more than 3 because then it gets way too long. And who are you creating that value for? So again, this is where customer discovery comes in to understand who is that specific person that's facing that specific problem. And then again, if you are able to, which you should eventually be able to, is identifying what makes you different and unique from other people on the market, other solutions that exist on the market. Okay, now the fun part, pitching essentials. So there's sort of 5 key tips when you're pitching your ideas. And this is, I know it says pitching, the same thing goes for presenting as well. So we're gonna walk through them. But the first thing is to keep it really, really simple. I like the acronym, keep it super simple or keep it simple stupid. The KISS acronym is really great. Again, we don't wanna be that scientist who's got all of this technical terminology and can dive into like the very technicality of the solution, but can't actually tell me, like, as a layperson, what is this doing? One of my favorite examples of this, there is a kind of event that runs every summer in Montreal. It's called Startup Fest, and they have a pitch competition, as many of these events do. But this pitch competition is a little bit different. Typically, you get investors or you get judges who are kind of experts in an industry to watch the pitch competition. But instead, what they do is they take the mothers and grandmothers of the investors, and that is who you're pitching to. And the idea is that if you can't clearly articulate and present your ideas to someone's grandmother, grandparent, mother, whatever, then you do not understand your solution well enough, you do not understand your business well enough, because you need to be able to explain it very simply. And so that's a really great test of like, if you're building something and you're talking to your friend who has absolutely no idea, being like, hey, can I run this, my value proposition by you? Does it make sense? Do you understand what it is? And that is a great test of like, does even the most out of reach person or out of touch person understand what I'm doing? And if they don't, then it's a sign that you need to kind of keep refining things and keeping it simple. The next one is to know your audience. So understanding who's in the room, what's the setting, is going to be important to help you understand what context that you're going to need to provide in this presentation or this pitch. What is their relationship with the problem? So is this a problem that they experience themselves firsthand? Is this a problem maybe a family member experiences? Is this a problem that they know that their partner experiences in their business, in their kind of work life? What is their relationship with the problem? The closer of relationship they have, the better they're going to be to empathize with what you're saying and what you're describing, because they actually, they're living that problem and they know. If they're not that close in understanding of the problem, then you probably need to kind of build a little bit more context of like, why is this problem such a problem? And the last piece is, what are your goals in doing this presentation? For me, doing this presentation today, I'm here to just impart knowledge to you all on doing a presentation. I'm pitching to kind of help you guys learn and help you understand these fundamentals. But that's the purpose, and really understanding like you're not doing a presentation. Who wants to be doing a presentation, right? Like no one really wants to be doing it, but it's really understanding. So with that being said, what is the purpose of why you're doing it? Typically, this could be asking for money, this could be asking for connections, this could be looking for partnerships, this could be a sales pitch, whatever it is, understand what that is, and again, you're gonna tailor how you deliver it, what you deliver, what the context is to your presentation. The next thing is to be authentic. So it's really important when you get up on stage, you're wanting to incorporate that storytelling element, you're wanting people to listen and stay engaged and understand, and the best way to do that is to just be authentic and be yourself. Don't try to duplicate someone else's style of presenting, because if it's not natural to you, it's just gonna look awkward and uncomfortable, and people are gonna like, nah, it's gonna be like, I don't wanna watch that because I can tell that they're uncomfortable and then it's making me uncomfortable. So really, the best way to do this is to just practice, and understand like, what are your strengths, what are you good at, what works best for you, and just really be yourself. So it does take some practice to get into like, especially if you've got like a presenter alternate ego. It can take a few tries, but even just practicing to yourself and like in front of the mirror can really help you to understand, what do you like, what don't you like, even like how you prepare for pitches and how you develop your pitches, all comes into just being authentic. The next one is to stay on task. So again, going back to understanding what is the goal of your presentation, what are you trying to get out of it, what is the end result? Because again, you want to stay on that focus. If I am trying to pitch to someone to give me money, and I know they're going to be looking at these 3 things, I need to make sure that I am staying on task and I'm focusing on what those 3 things are that are going to help that person to make the decision of like, are they going to give me money or not? You also don't want to ramble, so really, again, staying on focus, staying on task, providing the information that you need to provide, because again, we want to keep it very simple. This says only introduce 2 topics per slide. I actually don't even like doing that. I like to keep it to 1 topic per slide, but ultimately it's up to you. And the last thing is less is more. So it's always better to deliver, some people get very nervous and they just overload as much information into like a 5-minute presentation, for example, as they can, because they're like, I'm really scared. I just want to make sure that I have all of the information there. But it's really important. Then what happens is people can get overwhelmed, they can get confused, they can't remember everything. So if you're able to keep it really simple, less is more in this case oftentimes, and then they understand what it is that they're doing, then it's going to help you stay on task, and again, it's going to help them to remember and comprehend better what you're presenting. And the last thing, we talked about storytelling, is to tell a story. So starting with some kind of hook where you can really capture people's attention and really draw them in and get them really excited about what's to come. Then you want to be following a very logical flow. In stories, we usually hate when they're jumping all around, and the same goes for a pitch or presentation, really following a logical flow. The next thing is keeping it engaging. So hopefully you're an engaging speaker and you can really focus on, asking the audience questions, doing dramatic pauses, anything like that to keep it engaging. And then the last thing is, really being able to tie in an emotional component to it. So we talked about, people really resonate and remember when they feel something. And so building up emotions, maybe you can present the problem in a way that makes people feel bad, makes people want to help, whatever that is, to just keep it super, again, you want to connect with them and you want to make them not just think, but also feel. Okay, so here's an example which doesn't have the animations that I wanted it to have, but essentially you want to start by, in terms of following a logical flow, we want to start by setting the stage of what this context is. Then we have what the problem is, talking about how you're impacted or affected. So in this case, maybe you're the mom in this case, and you're like, that is my child, and my child is about to get taken by aliens. Then you enter the solution, which is you coming in and fighting off the alien. Then you want to talk about your impact, which is you made the alien go away. Then you talk about who is on your team. So, you're the one who's out there fighting the aliens, but who's like your guy in the chair who's giving you all the intel that you need to be able to fight the aliens. And then you want to have like an ask or a call to action. So again, what is the point of your presentation? What are you hoping to get out of it? and then ask everyone for whatever it is. In this case, it could be I'm asking to recruit more people to my team so we can have an even bigger impact and we can fight off more aliens. So just being able to present it in a very logical way, that really helps the audience. If they're confused, they're just gonna tune out and then you've lost them. And then again, why are you presenting? What is the point? Okay, different pitching scenarios. So the first example is an elevator pitch. I don't know how many of you guys have heard of an elevator pitch, but essentially the idea is you're at a conference and you went to this conference because you wanted to speak to this one investor. They have the same thesis as you, they are perfect, they write the size checks you need, but they're so busy because they're a VC and they're a big deal that you cannot get any time with them. But you guys are staying at the same hotel, and you happen to just be waiting for the elevator at the same time. So you have from the time it takes for you to walk into the elevator, go up one floor, and then walk out to give that investor your pitch. And that's like, what, 30 seconds, a minute? So in that, you need to be able to have this really concise, clear way of really clearly articulating what it is you're doing, why you're doing it, who you're doing it for, maybe what stage you're at, and it needs to be in an interesting enough way that when that investor is walking out on the first floor, he's like, hey, here's my business card. This was really great. Please reach out to me, I wanna learn more. So you wanna do it in enough of a way that they're like, this is really cool, I wanna learn more. The next thing is the closed door investor pitch. So as it sounds like, you're pitching to an investor. It's a closed door, which means it's a private meeting. You're not having this big audience. Typically, these last about an hour, and you're probably spending the first 10 to 15 minutes actually presenting on your business. And then for the next 45 minutes, they're just drilling you with questions. In this kind of situation, you can probably reveal some more, as long as you've signed an NDA, you can reveal some kind of proprietary information because it's a closed-door meeting, if that's something that you feel like you need to do. But they're probably, because they're investors, they're gonna give money, they're gonna wanna know things like, what is your traction to date? What does the market look like? What are your financials? So that's something that you're really, really gonna wanna have a really deep dive in. And it might not necessarily be in the presentation, but you have 45 minutes of Q&A, and so really being able to dive into that and know that stuff inside and out is going to be really, really valuable. And that's an important note, that not the presentation, the actual act of presenting isn't necessarily the presentation itself. So the 45 minutes, the majority of your time is in Q&A. So being super prepared, knowing your stuff, having printouts potentially, having appendix slides in your deck is also part of the preparation that needs to go into a presentation like this. The next example is a pitch competition. So this is what we have at the end of the Launchpad program with the liftoff competition. Typically you have anywhere from 3 to 5 minutes to do a presentation. You're gonna kind of touch on all of the sort of key points of your business, and then there's gonna be a panel of judges who are gonna, again, anywhere from like 3 to 5 minutes of Q&A. Again, this is probably a public setting, so you would want to be kind of not reveal any proprietary information. You want to give this as more of like an overview of your business, what you're doing, really touching on like your traction to date, what is the problem, how is the solution helping. And with this, you'd probably have like a pitch deck and some appendix slides, maybe like an example of your solution. I do make energy bars, so we always have energy bars that we actually hand out to the judges so they can try them if they want. The next one is a boardroom presentation. This is very similar to the investor pitch in the sense that you are, probably closed door. This is with your team, your board, your advisors, whatever this could be. Again, you probably are doing like 5 to 10 minutes of presenting and then a lot of Q&A. They're again probably going to want to like deeper dive into kind of reports, next steps, progress, milestones, things like that. So again, having printouts, having things, really knowing, not just for the presentation, but actually knowing the ins and outs, very detailed of your business to help people understand, to show that you know what you're talking about. And the last thing, which most people don't think of as a pitch, but is 100% a pitch, is a customer interaction. So right now, we're getting you all to go out and talk to some potential customers and learn from them. And this is really just, you're just trying to learn and get to know them. But in the way that you're presenting, you might say, hey, I'm at UFC, I'm working on this project, we're looking into this area, can I ask you some questions? The way that you're doing that is setting you up. If you want that person to be an eventual customer once your product launches, really focusing on constantly pitching to them in a way that's professional, that you're answering all their questions, you look very knowledgeable, and they, as a customer, they're very self-involved and self-focused, meaning they're going to want to know, how is this going to help me? How much is this going to cost me? What are you going to do for me? And so being able to just answer that questions and be very customer-focused is going to be very important. And these can vary from, again, like a quick interaction to like super long conversations. So this one can vary quite a bit in that sense. So with all of these different pitching scenarios, I kind of tried to touch on all of these points for all of them, but the level of detail that you get into is going to be very different. Again, you've got a 30-second elevator pitch, you're not really getting into any detail, versus an investor meeting, you need to be able to dive in and out of every single piece of your business in order to show that you know what you're talking about and help those investors to believe that you know what you're talking about. In terms of time allotment, again, 30 seconds versus an hour. You're going to have a lot more to talk about. You might give more context. You might go into more detail on things. Then stakeholder, who's in the room? Again, what do they want? What's the purpose of what they're doing? Why you're presenting? Why are they there to listen to you? And tailoring that presentation to who's in the room. If you're doing a pitch competition to a general panel of judges, it's going to be a lot more general. You're going to use a lot less terminology because you want to keep it more open-ended. If you're talking to an investor who is, you're in the med tech space, let's say, and they're a med tech investor, they know the terminology. You're going to want to show that you also can keep up with that and you know what you're talking about. And the last thing is the tools used. So again, I mentioned, for customer interactions, for example, you might actually have a prototype or built an MVP of your solution that you can actually show them and get feedback on. You might have pitch decks, you might have reports, so there's lots of different tools and things that you can use depending on what that scenario is. So when you're using visual aids, like slide decks, excuse me, it's important that you're keeping the text to a minimum, you're keeping it super clear. You want your slides to be very clean and easy to understand, and you want to keep it very uniform and branded. So you've probably noticed we have the same slide deck that we use for all of our workshops. We use them for all of our the live sessions. All of the documents that I send you guys is branded. This front podium is branded. It's all the same because we want to keep it very uniform and very cohesive. My favorite thing to say is that the slides are the supporting act. So when you're doing a presentation or a pitch, you are the main act. You are what everyone wants you to be paying attention to. So using the slides as sort of that supporting act of this is helping me to emphasize my point. But my slides are clean enough that you're not spending a bunch of time trying to figure out what's going on my slides. And if you are not a graphic designer, as I am not, there are many free tools. PowerPoint and Canva are my two favorites to help you design these really, really nice, very clean decks. And they have tons of templates, so you can just use those and plug it in, and it's easy to go and ready to go. So yeah, slides are sort of the secondary act to you as the presenter. Again, keeping it really simple. So ignoring this slide that has more than 3 bullet points on it, but really making sure that it's clean, it's simple, people can understand what's going on. When I switch to a new deck or a new slide, I have 7 seconds for you guys to look at the slide and understand what's going on before I lose your interest. So if you are looking at a slide and you're so distracted by the slide that you have no idea what's going on, you're not listening to what I'm saying, because we are actually very bad at multitasking. You're not listening to what I'm saying, and so then I've lost you. And I want the majority of what I'm saying to be coming from what I'm saying and not on the slides. So a good example was that deck of the story with the flow, and I was I wish the animations were working, because when you guys looked at that slide, that was probably whoa, what is going on? Had I had the animations and walked through it, you would have been able to follow me as I went through it and really understand what each piece is and what was going on. It's also, you can have, so typically with presentations and things, there could be a slide limit, so the maximum number of slides you could have, but it's always possible to have an appendix slide as well. So this is if you want to go into more detail, so for example, at a pitch competition, if you know that the judges are gonna ask you a question about your financials, let's say, you can have a slide that you show after your presentation. So when they ask you for it, you can flip to the appendix slide and ask your question. And these are typically, you're gonna dive deeper. I think I have like at this point like 20 appendix slides in my deck, just because as people have asked me things, or as people have gone deeper, or if I don't have time to talk about something in my presentation, I'll put it in my appendix slides. I wouldn't necessarily recommend having 20 slides because it's a lot, so I kind of, for each deck that I make, I will like pull what I think is relevant for that presentation or that pitch, but I would definitely recommend having some appendix slides. And the last thing is a pitching deck versus a reading deck. So if I am doing a presentation and I'm gonna be talking and I'm gonna be explaining to you what's on the slides, I don't wanna have a lot of words and I don't want to have a lot of information because I want you paying attention to me. Again, I am the main act and my slides are the secondary act. However, if I am emailing you my deck, for example, and you've got like three words on the slide, you're gonna have absolutely no idea what's going on. And so having multiple versions of your deck is okay and recommended. And that second deck, the reading deck, is one that it basically has all the information that I would be saying in my presentation, but because I'm not there to walk you through the presentation, it's all on the slides. So having multiple decks is good, is encouraged for this kind of situation. Okay, I'm doing pitching framework. Okay, so this is sort of the general framework that exists in a pitch, and in a pitch deck. So we've got the first slide, which is, and I'm gonna walk you through them, but these are sort of the 12 slides you want to have. The key here is that, again, depending on the audience, depending on the type of pitch, depending on the time, you might have room for this, you might not have room for all of this. Again, if it's sort of an investor pitch, you might really wanna have multiple slides on the financials and the market. So this is the framework. We start from here, and then you can kind of adapt as needed depending on that presentation. Okay, so the first slide is the introduction slide. So this is the slide where you go like, hi, my name's Alessa. I'm the co-founder of this company. I do this. So that's kind of the opening slide. The title slide that would be, as you kind of walk onto the stage, would be up on there. Typically you want your logo and then contact information. And the next slide is when you really want to start with the problem. So we talked about storytelling. So really being able to tell a story of like, what is the problem? Who is experiencing this problem? How big of a problem is this? Is this a problem that like you and your 12 friends are facing? Or is this a problem that like all women are facing? Or like 30 million people globally are facing? So really kind of showing like, hey, here's a very, I like starting with a very, like putting someone on the screen and being like, hey, this is this person, they're facing this problem. This person is not alone. There are, and then you can incorporate a stat of like in 2019 or 2022, this many people were experiencing the problem. Just to kind of show that like, this is a human problem, but also it's a big problem because a lot of people are facing it. Even better, if it's your own story and it's your own problem that you're facing, talk about yourself, talk about your experience, talk about your situation. Because that's gonna be like, people are gonna be like, oh, you really understand the problem because you are facing it firsthand. And for the visuals, just really showing, kind of an image that represents the problem. A picture is worth 1,000 words. So, if you have just one picture instead of a bunch of words, that's not a bad thing either. Okay, then we're gonna jump into the solution slide. So at a very high level, what is your solution? How do you use it? How does it work? How do your customers interact with it? Whatever. This is where all of the technical people in the room, we don't actually care about the technicality of your solution. We wanna know, we don't care about like the nanotubes and things that guy was talking about in the video. What we care about is like, okay, what does it actually do for me as the user? How is it helping me? How am I interacting with the problem? So this is where we want that really high level overview. Again, if you're in an investor meeting, they might ask for more information. But you just need to give enough information of like, hey, this is the solution, this is why it works. But like from a user perspective, here's how they would use it. You want to put either images of your solution up there. You can kind of, if you have Figma slides, you can walk people through the Figma. But really, again, keeping it like super clean, super simple. Then we jump into the value proposition. So the value proposition is what value do you provide to your customer? What are the pain points that you're solving? There's on one of the worksheets that we're gonna do next week is a value proposition worksheet, and we're gonna walk you through building that. So really focusing on like the value. Now, something that I really wanna highlight is the difference between value and like features and benefits. So if we're looking at Google, like the Google search engine as an example, Google, the features and benefits are you can type whatever you want in, you can get a bunch of results super, super fast. Those are the features of it, those are the benefits. The value to that though is that I'm looking for information and I can get all this information at my fingertips. So that's really the difference is like the solution, on the solution side, you wanna touch on what is the actual solution itself, and then you want to jump into like, but how is this actually helping my customer or my consumer? How is this actually providing value to them, and what is that value? Is it, a lot of times these values are convenience, peace of mind, saving time, saving money. Those are kind of typical like standard value propositions, and it doesn't have to just be those things, but those are kind of examples of what those values could be. Again, visual suggestion, keeping it very clean. I really like using icons, keywords to kind of just emphasize like time saving, cost saving, and easy, like whatever that is, and just having that. So it's again, very clean, very simple, so people are listening to your explanation. Then we jump into the target market and the customer slide. So the target market would be who is like the persona of the person that you're helping. Knowing that person really inside and out is really helpful. So like, you know, my typical consumer is like a mom of 2. She takes her kids to soccer practice in the summer, on the weekends. She shops at these grocery stores. She works this kind of job. She lives in this area of the city. So really understanding like who is that target market, who is that early adopter, who's that first person that you are going after, because again, if you're going after everybody, you're going after nobody. So you really want to have that clear niche market that you're going after and really understand who that is. What value are providing them? How are you helping them solve their pain points? And also being able to to point to why did you pick them? And Jeff kind of alluded to in the Tuesday workshop of being able to say, well, in all of my customer discovery, I found this is a great way to answer the question of why did you pick them? Then you also want to talk about the market. So it's not just Sarah, this mom of 2 who takes her kids to soccer practice, but it's also there are a million Sarahs in Alberta that I'm solving this problem for. So really understanding how big is the market, what are the market trends that are happening. Plant-based foods, for example, or carbon capture, those are hot sustainability. That's a hot trend right now. The market for those things is really growing, whereas something like typewriters, for example, the market's pretty small for that. It's probably only going down. That's not a really big market. That's not giving you a lot of opportunity to, build a business in. And also showing the potential market. So this is where you want to say this is the market size and this is what it's growing at. Again, putting some stats on the slide is really helpful for those visual suggestions. The next slide is the competition. So who are the key players in the space? Who else is working on solving this problem? Again, we pointed out, if you say you have no competition, you're wrong. So do not say that. Know who your competitors are. It can be someone who's doing something, maybe you have a product, but someone has a service that's solving the same problem. So identifying that. Maybe it's just status quo. Maybe that it's not a big enough problem. People are just happy to do the status quo. Then you need to be able to convince them. So then at that point, status quo and just not changing what they're currently doing to solve the problem is a competitor to you. So understanding that, and then there's different ways of kind of visually representing that. You can do kind of a graph, with this, and you can be we're up here because we're the best, and then everyone else is not as good as you, so they're not touching you. Or kind of a matrix where you kind of list some competitors, list some key features, and you can put X's and check marks. Again, if you Google competitor slide, there's tons of examples that exist that you can kind of see to say, okay, this is what it is. Then you want to talk about your approach to market or your go-to-market strategy. So how are you going to acquire your first customer? Or if you already have your first customer, how are you going to acquire your next set of customers? How are you going to build that brand awareness? How are you going to get people to know? There might be some education involved in them switching to your solution. How are you going to do that? What channels will you use? What is your marketing plan? How are you going to get out? How are you going to make people aware of what you're doing? The first steps of finding your customer is not scalable, and I can attest to that firsthand. In my business, how we got our first customers was we were hiking up mountains with samples and handing them out. That is not something that is scalable. That is not something that you can do once you're huge. But when you're first getting started, you probably have no money. Playing in the ad space on Facebook and Google is so expensive, it's not worth it. You probably don't have a good enough idea of what people are searching at to actually do that. So we literally went out and we knew exactly who our customers were and met them where they were. And it's not scalable, and that's okay. It doesn't have to be scalable at the beginning, but you need to figure out how you're getting that first customer, how you're building that buy-in from them, and then you can go from there. The next one is your revenue model. So how are you actually going to be making money? Are you a B2B? Are you B2C? Are you using direct sales channels? Are you going to use a broker, whatever? How are you getting that first point of revenue? And then moving on, how are you going to expand that revenue to get using different channels? This is where you can also talk about what your costs are, what your margins are, things like that. Then you want to have your forecast of what are your goals moving forward? Identifying goals of, in 6 months, we want to, right now we're in our beta, in 6 months we want to be fully launched into the market, in 1 year we want to have this many customers, and then through that you can identify financial goals to go with it. So if you can kind of make these assumptions, and we all know that you're just making these assumptions and that's okay, but we want to see a rationale and reasoning behind it. It could be, hey, right now we're going to focus in Alberta, and in a year we're going to be Canada-wide, so we expect our revenues to go up by X amount, and that's why we predicted that. In year 1, we're only making $250,000, which would be incredible, and in year 2, we're going to do $1 million because we're going to 4X because of our expansion. So being able to tie some of those financial goals to actual tangible product development, expansion goals, just to kind of justify hey, this is why we think this is what we're going to be at. Again, really showing you for the visuals, showing a graph of that forecasting, and I like to put underneath year 1 we're going to do this, year 2 we're going to do this, year 3 we're going to do this, so you have some kind of point 1 or 2 words of why you think you're going to hit that revenue that year. Okay, then we want to jump into milestones. So what have you accomplished to date? So if you've done extensive customer discovery, if you've done some prototyping, if you've done some beta testing, whatever that is. If you have any wins from Launchpad, or if you've done anything before this program or after this program, talking about what those wins are, and then talking about any traction in sales. This is a really good opportunity to be look how great we are, we've done all of these things, because what that does is it really builds trust in the audience that hey, these people have done all this work, I believe everything they're saying, and also I believe that they can do the things that they want to accomplish. I also like to extrapolate this forward, and it kind of ties into the kind of road mapping forecasting side. We were saying, okay, at 6 months we're going to do this, in a year we're going to do this, never go up to more than 3 years. 3 years is already stretching it. Things are going to change so much, but kind of showing okay, this is where we're at. This is what we've done. This is where we're at. And now in the next 6 months, this is what we're going to accomplish. Or in the next year, this is what we're going to accomplish. Okay, then you want to talk about the team. So who's currently on the team? What experience do you have? What education do you have that makes you the best team to solve the problem that you're solving? If you have any advisors, if you have any mentors, if you have any coaches, you can put them on the slide. I would definitely recommend asking them first, so they don't just randomly see their face on a screen and they're oh, I didn't know I was going to be there. So definitely ask first. And also if you're missing people on let's say you're a team of engineers and you're missing someone with a business acumen, you can say we don't have a business person right now, but this is something we're looking for, and maybe that's going to be your ask for the end of the presentation. So indicating who it is you're looking for, and if you're missing anyone, if you're looking for advisors, if you're looking for industry connections, whatever that is, indicate that, and then just having a picture of everyone on the team, with their name, their experience, fun things like that. And then your last slide, arguably the most important slide, is your ask. So you've done this whole presentation for us. You spent all of this time preparing this information to tell us why. What was the point of doing that presentation? What is your ask? Who's in the room and how can they help you? So it does not have, oftentimes it is a financial ask, but it does not have to be a financial ask. So you can ask for introductions, you can ask for advice, you can ask for connections, you can ask for whatever it is that you're needing, you're struggling with. I sometimes, if I'm presenting to a lay audience, I literally put up a QR code and I say, please go buy bars right now. It works. So whatever your ask is, whatever you need, again, this is where knowing who's in the room and what they can actually offer you is important. But this is like, you just did this great presentation for us, and why? So on this, I like to have your logo. I like to write out your ask. Typically, especially if there's a Q&A, this is the slide that you'll leave up. So anyone walking by, anyone coming into the room can say, oh, hey, this company is looking for chicken farmers. I know a chicken farmer. My neighbor is a chicken farmer. I can connect them. And then that's why you want to have your contact information on the slide as well, so they know how to get a hold of you. Okay, so some last few tips for when you're actually doing the presentation. One, if you're on a stage, or if you're up at a podium like I am, really owning the stage. If it is a virtual presentation or a virtual pitch, there's different, sort of same, but different rules, but really creating this presence. You don't want to be hiding too far back from the camera. You don't want to be like swooped over. You want to be standing tall, owning the stage. I know I said be authentic, and sometimes we're not always confident when we go up to these presentations, but this is where like, fake it if you make it, like fake it till you make it a little bit in terms of like, act like you're confident, convince yourself you're confident, shift that nervous energy into excited energy. You're so excited to share all the work that you've done and really own that stage. The other thing is that body language is key. So if you're hunched over, if you're looking down, if you're not paying attention, people can see that and they're picking up on it. And it's like, if you don't care enough to be present physically in the moment, why should I pay attention to you? Why should I take my time to pay attention to you? So body language is really, really important. And you can also use kind of like, I talk with my hands a lot, but you can use your hands if you want to just really help you to emphasize points that you're trying to make. The next thing is how you say it is more important than what you say. So tonality, enthusiasm goes a really, really long way, and it helps the audience to kind of really tune in. Because if you're just talking like super monotone and no one wants to listen to you and you can't be bothered, they're not listening to what you're saying, and you could be saying like the most important thing ever. It doesn't matter. You can also use tonality to like really build up excitement. So if you're talking really fast and you're talking really excited and your voice is getting raised, you're really excited and everyone wants to tune in to listen to what you're saying because you're about to say something really exciting. Or if I'm about to say something really, really impactful, I might pause and give you all a chance to take in what I'm saying. So do you see how you can kind of play around with like how you say it to really get that audience? And again, this is where being engaging really ties in. Keeping eye contact, important. So I don't know if you guys noticed, I have been looking over the back row's heads this whole presentation because it helps me to seem like I'm making eye contact with everyone. I also cannot make eye contact with everyone because if I do, I'm gonna get really distracted and then I will forget what I'm saying. But that's a way that I'm now looking over the back people's heads. If you're in a big auditorium, you might not wanna look all the way up, just kind of pick a middle row and just look above people's heads. That's a tip that I use to just kind of make everyone think that I'm making eye contact with them when I'm really making eye contact with nobody. On Zoom, if you're presenting like virtually, don't be looking at your screen. Be looking at your camera, and if you have to put like a little smiley face or something beside the camera so you remember to look at that, do it, because it really comes across when you're looking into the camera, like people really can tell the difference. As well, if you are presenting virtually, positioning yourself so you're not too far back, that like you're tiny, but you're not so close that you're like very in their face and potentially part of you's cut off. So just playing around, I've like stacked books, I've stacked boxes to get my laptop up so that I'm eye level with my camera. And the last thing is just practice, practice, practice. Again, practicing, especially if you haven't done a lot of pitching or presenting, practicing just to yourself in front of the mirror, to friends, is really helpful just to you're like knowing it and learning it, but also just to really help you build, not just what you're saying, but actually building that stage presence, actually using that tonality, potentially using body language. And another tip that I've gotten is also to like actually record yourself doing it, and then like on your like voice notes on your phone, and then put like headphones in and just like listen to it like a podcast. Just especially if you're having trouble remembering what the points are you want to say, that's a great way to actually help you remember it. My actual last piece of advice is when you're coming up with your presentation, figure out what preparation style works for you. When I first started doing pitches, I used to write out a script for myself to follow. The problem with that is you remember specific words and remember specific orders, and then if you stumble or you fumble on stage and you miss something, then you're like, I don't know. Now what I like to do is I just like to write out sort of like key points that I want to hit, whether that's 2 to 3 points that I want to make sure that I hit for each slide that I've created. And then you can just run through it. And this is where, again, that practice running through it. As you say it and as you practice it a bunch, you'll kind of get into a natural flow, and you'll notice yourself starting to say things in the same way, say things in the same order. And that way, honestly, I pitched like last week or 2 weeks ago, and I had practiced it so many times that when I got on stage, I like just completely blacked out and like pitched, and everyone was like, that was so good, and I was like, I don't remember it because I just fully blacked out, but I had practiced it enough times and I knew what points I needed to say for each slide that I was just able to deliver a really strong presentation. So with that, I will leave it. Anyone have any questions? Please feel free to ask, and if not, my ask for you today is to please give feedback on this presentation. But yes, if anyone has any questions, feel free to raise your hand. Kurt's walking around with a mic. Ricky, do we have any questions online? Yes, Kurt.
Oh, thank you so much. It was very useful and I enjoyed it. Actually, I have a question about showing the visuals for the problems. When our product is health-related and solve the health-related problems, showing some problems about the disease, the allergies may have some negative effects on the audience.
Yeah.
How can we show this problem?
Like, you don't want to visually show the problem because it's like maybe a little gruesome. I think just really creating like the human aspect of it. So, you know, putting a face to the problem and saying like, this is Sarah. Sarah experiences this problem. Colin, do you have something to add to that? Or do you have a question? Okay. Yeah, so basically just like, you know, you don't actually have to like physically show the problem. And if your solution, like let's say your solution is like a cream, like you don't, you know, you can just put an image of the cream without showing like if it's like a really bad cut or something, like you don't necessarily need to show that.
So I'll just add to that. It depends on your audience. If you're going to pitch to a high school, don't show graphic images. If you're going to pitch to a medical tech group, then showing a brain cut open with electrodes on it, that's fine. And if you think back to Megan from Nanotest, who was on our panel a few weeks ago, she deals with wound care. And she shows very graphic images of before and after wound care. She doesn't give anybody any warning, but they remember it. So there's many different ways you can use the images. You've really got to think about your audience and what you want them to take away with that image. Why are you using the image? If it's a bad image, why is it a bad image? Is it bad because it's awful and it's going to make people throw up? Or is it bad because it's not really telling a message and it's just going to shock them? Is it for shock value? What is the point of the image? If it's telling your story, then that's important. Yeah.
And shock can be a really good way to make a memorable presentation too, so that's not the worst thing in the world. Anyone else have any questions? Yes. Kurt's gonna come over with the mic.
Thank you, Alessa.
Yeah.
What do you do when inadvertently you lost the audience? How do you come back?
That's a great question. I think if you notice the audience trying to starting to kind of die off, get distracted, not pay attention. I think trying to think back to sort of those fundamentals of how do I engage an audience. So whether you're going to change your tone of voice or the speed that you're talking, whether you're going to say something that's like really controversial that might capture their attention, you really just want to think about like, okay, I'm losing people, like what are ways that I can engage the audience back? This is where I think, again, just like practicing to yourself, but also practicing to other people, like your friends. I know they're your friends and they're probably really nice to you and they don't want to hurt your feelings, but like when I'm practicing, I'm like, I don't want to hear any good things about my presentation. Like, I want you to tell me what's wrong. Did I lose you? Did I lose you somewhere? Did you not understand something? So I think the best way is to just be a little more proactive about it and just by practicing and running it by people, getting that feedback. But if you are going to lose people and you're noticing you're losing people, you might not have time. Like if it's a 2-minute presentation, you might just not have time, honestly. If they can't keep their attention for 2 minutes, that feels more like a them problem than a you problem. But yeah, just trying to think about like, okay, I need to wow them. I need to say something shocking. I need to get really excited so that they're like, oh, what am I missing out on? Just to try to re-engage them. Kurt, one in the front.
Hey, thank you, Alessa, for the informative presentation. I have a question. I want to know your experience on showing videos on pitch competitions. Would it distract audience or is it helpful, just short videos?
I would say avoid videos in pitches. Typically you have a very limited amount of time, and if there's a technical issue, if it doesn't play, if the volume's not working, then that is just getting cut out of your time and then you're losing it. So, you know, if you absolutely have to show a video, that's one thing. But if there's a way around it with like animations or just putting like stills of the video or photos or whatever, I would say do that. Because the other thing is like typically it's not going to be your laptop, and so you don't know like what the settings are on someone else's laptop, things like that. So I would just, as much as possible, avoid putting a video in a pitch. Yeah, just because if you risk, it's just kind of risky, and personally, like, you don't necessarily want the added stress of like, is my video gonna work when I get on stage? I don't know. But anyone have any other questions? Okay, well with that, thank you all. We can wrap it up. And I will see you on Tuesday for our last workshop and our last section of Launchpad for this year before we pick up again in the new year. Thank you all.